Hello, lovely sewing friends. How are you? I hope you guys are doing well. I think I may have the world's squeakiest chair right now, but we digress. So, I want to talk to you guys all about sustainable fashion because really within the last 10-15 years, to my knowledge, it has become like the it thing in fashion. It can be a bit of a blurred line about what sustainable fashion is. So I want to talk to you guys all about it. And then we're going to talk about what low impact fashion is and also how you can become a more sustainable sewer. And look at me, I've got notes for this one and I have half of my water bottle filled, so we'll get into it. So I hope you guys are having a lovely week. I've got my Halloween party this Friday, 3 or 4 days away. So I'm gonna make you guys this video. I've also just filmed a sewing tutorial, the first ever sewing tutorial for my YouTube. So if you guys see that hanging around, make sure to click on it because you learn how to do some hand stitching. But all is well over here, lots of good things coming on, and I'm actually starting to do a lot more work on Ford, growing Ford, to do sewing tutorials that can kind of add to your sewing knowledge. So speaking of sewing knowledge, I think the one way that I like to clothe myself now, because Ford, I like how we're nearly 2 minutes into the video and I've already started ignoring my notes, but let's just talk because I think that's the best way to talk about these kinds of things. So when I first started Ford nearly 6 years ago, I wanted to make everything in my wardrobe, right? Now, with 6 years on, I still have not made everything in my wardrobe because of certain things that kind of made me rethink my goals in sustainability. For those of you who don't know, I did a degree in sustainable fashion design. So I've been around sustainable fashion for at least 10 years now. So I have a good workings of it, but I just want to talk to you guys about what it is and how you can produce something sustainably in a different way. So sustainable fashion is often used as a marketing ploy or a greenwashing type of advertising. And I think that's why it's seen such a massive boom. But consumers are so smart these days that if you say something is sustainable, we're going to call you out if it's not. So there are brands that do sustainably really well and are good, but then there are others that use it as a marketing ploy. So sustainable fashion means reducing the impact on the earth and in the garment manufacturing process to make an item, right? So in the life cycle of a garment, it is normally linear, but this is where you hear the whole circular fashion system kind of come into play, because usually it's a linear system where it's raw materials, make a product, consumer, disposal. But the circular fashion ecology, the circular fashion system, we're just going to call it circular fashion system, talks about fashion going from raw materials, production, consumer, recycle, back to raw materials so that it can go around in a circle and can be done several times over. That is pretty much what sustainable fashion means in my interpretation. It means creating something that has a lesser impact on the earth and also has a renewable source. So, for example, using cotton that hasn't been sprayed with pesticides and is a seed that can then produce other seeds that can produce more cotton. And there's something called terminator seeds where I'm not going to go in. Terminator seeds basically mean that they sprout once and then someone has to go and buy more seeds to then make more cotton. But that's more on the agricultural side. But long story short, sustainable fashion is about making conscious choices in the production, wear, and disposal of a garment. I think we got there eventually. Now, my viewpoint on sustainable fashion is the most sustainable garment is one that need not be made. Think about that. The most sustainable garment is one that need not be made. So, going with that line of thinking, the most sustainable garment is the one that you already have. Because for a garment to be sustainable and to be classified as sustainable fashion, it needs to have a purpose, right? Now, anything that is bought in the sustainable fashion system that is not needed, therefore cannot be sustainable fashion because it wasn't needed, right? And I think the problem that I have with sustainable fashion is that I'm just thinking the best way to like phrase this. The issues that I have with sustainable fashion is that it in the life cycle of a garment, it's going to spend the majority of its time with that consumer, right? Let's say, so it spends the majority of the time with the consumer. Therefore, if the consumer wears it once and then throws it out, it is not sustainable fashion because it hasn't been made to fit a purpose, and it was not necessarily, and it stripped Earth's resources, time, energy, and effort to make something that needed not be made, right? So with that logic, there is a very small minority of garments that are made in the sustainable fashion industry that need to have been made, right? So I want to know how much of sustainable fashion actually is sustainable fashion, because long story short, if it is bought as a form of consumption that is unnecessary, it's not sustainable fashion. Because sustainable fashion this is the thing with sustainable fashion as a marketing kind of business principle consumption kind of thing, is that I had a thought, is that it places you as the consumer have the ability to make it sustainable fashion or not sustainable fashion. So I think this leads me on to my next point. Sorry if that kind of like sounded a bit scattered, but I think it's really important to emphasize that sustainable fashion is the consumer. Sustainable fashion is the consumer, because I think there's different elements to it. And if you could do like a quiz, it would be interesting to see, is the garment you bought sustainable fashion? Because technically something can't be sustainable fashion if it was like made using synthetic fibers, or if it can't be recycled, or different elements of that. So bringing it back, sustainable fashion to me means holding onto a garment for an extended period of time and mending it, repairing it, altering it. It isn't necessarily where I bought it, which is interesting. So the concept that I've kind of come up with in response to this is low impact, right? Low impact fashion, because it acknowledges that time, energy, and effort has gone into creating that. And it is up to you, the consumer, to then decide, do I need this garment or do I want this garment? If it's a need, then low impact becomes sustainable fashion. If it's a, I want this thing, it's low impact to low impact, you know? So having the term low impact implies that there has been a low impact on the resources that have taken to create that garment, the time, the labor, the energy, the transportation of that garment from one place on earth to another. So I think it's really important to place the emphasis on the consumer, on whether it is sustainable fashion or low impact fashion. And I just think that's just really interesting. But because we're all sewers, we're going to talk about sewing. Because I've told the story, but I love it, and so I'm going to keep on talking about it. I had that dress that I then made into this top, and I love it, and I wear it all the time already. I'm wearing another version of it today, but I've got this top here. I love it. So that was originally a dress that was a sustainable garment bought from a sustainable clothing shop, but I think I wore it only a handful of times and then it sat in my wardrobe for 5 years. Is that sustainable fashion? Maybe, maybe not. Is that low impact? Yes. And then I've made it into a top now that I'm going to wear all the time. And with the scrap fabrics, I'm going to make something else. And then I've also got that pair of pants that is in the same fabric that I'm going to make into something else. So my ability to sew has allowed me to take sustainable fashion and low impact fashion and make it sustainable fashion, because if I did not have the ability to sew, I could have easily thrown away that dress and I would have gone through so many more clothes if I didn't have the ability to sew. So therefore, sewing has allowed me to become a more sustainable consumer of the clothes that I do buy. So as a sewer, how do you make your sewing practice more sustainable? Because I think that's a really key impact to talk about. Because on my Instagram, I get a lot of people commenting like, oh, where do you find sustainable fabrics? Where do you find sustainable da? And I think, big picture, if you are trying to make your own clothes to lessen your impact on the earth, on resources, sewing is a great way. And you also build up a skill and a hobby, brilliant. I tend to shop for fabric at dead stock kind of shops, so that's end of line fabrics. I rarely buy fabrics new. I do have quite a bit of a stash from collecting over several years. And then when it comes to like threads and stuff, I tend to use a polyester thread. However, I have a recycled polyester one that I really want to try out. But I use Gutermann polyester thread, and that is because even though it's not a natural resource, I would prefer to use a thread that has a long lifespan when sewing with my garments, so that the garment can have a long lifespan, rather than a natural fiber that has the tendency to break, and then the garment won't last as long, or I'll have to keep on remaking it or repairing it throughout its life. So I think that it's a give and a take. It's a give and a take with everything. I love sewing as my hobby. I think it's great. I love the ability to clothe myself, to have that that consciousness about what's on my body. Also, sustainable fabrics. I like to use natural fibers because I don't like the idea of plastic touching my skin, but I do understand that it is an inevitability with certain things that I would sew. So yeah, I think it's a real conscious choice, and it is a give and a take. When it comes to sewing a new sewing project, I love to shop my stash. I love going through the things that I already have before going out and buying something new, because this is also like a girl math, sewing math kind of thing. If I shop my own stash, I've saved the amount, obviously, I've saved the amount of money I would have gone out and spent. So I'm earning money shopping my stash. And that's just the way I love to think about it. Another way that you can sew sustainably is adapting your sewing patterns, right? There are so many ways that you can easily adapt your sewing patterns to create new garments. For example, this top, if I just extended it and put a waist tie, dress, easy. Or I can get a basic t-shirt, extend the sleeves, tighten in the waist, high neck, collar, turtleneck, easy. But I do understand that that is a different skill set to sewing. It's more pattern development and what's it called? Fabric manipulation in some cases. That is something you can easily make little steps towards and build up to. So there's that. And then also it's looking at what you currently wear and looking for the gaps in your wardrobe. Because again, the most sustainable garment is one that you already have. And if you make something, sew something, it's a lot of time, energy, effort, and money going into making that thing. And if you don't wear it, then what was the point? For example, I have a dress in here, this one here. It's gorgeous. I love it. I love the fabric, and I was experimenting at the time with my sewing. So it's got lots of frills and it's lovely, lovely. It's a little big cottage core dress. I think I've worn it twice. So that is not a sustainable garment. It's a low impact, but how can I make it sustainable? Okay, I noticed I love wearing this top. I would love to make a matching like little set, so like some shorts. So I could make shorts and a top out of this, and that's great. Some of you may know that I have the Ford gathered dress and top. That is a zero waste sewing pattern, and zero waste sewing patterns are really, really good because you can easily unpick them and then use the fabric again, which I plan to do with a lot of my stuff. So that is just the tip of the iceberg on sustainable fashion, low impact fashion, and how to sew more sustainably. I think I've kind of like, I think with this subject, I've kind of worked through it while talking to you guys. But at the end of the day, if sewing is your hobby and you love sewing, then sew. Like, it's very easy to consider every single factor in this subject of sustainability. But as long as you're trying and you're educating yourself and you're learning something new and you enjoy it, then enjoy it. So that's what I've got to say on sustainable fashion, low impact fashion, and sustainable sewing. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. And I can't wait to show you guys the little sewing tutorial. I absolutely love it. I am so proud of myself because I was at the gym today and I was like, I wonder if I could do that. Like, do I have the time today to do that? And like, I was really like, maybe, maybe not. But then I was like, oh no, I really actually want to do that. So I have just shown you guys how to do a little hand stitch. This, again, scrap fabric I'm using on my tutorials. So I've shown you guys how to create this hem here by hand sewing. Because I love hand sewing my garments. I think it's a really lovely finishing touch to my sewing project. So yeah, more tutorials to come, hopefully. And yeah, I hope you guys have a lovely week, and I'll see you some other time, I guess. Hopefully here, same time next week. Yeah, let's do that. See ya.